Hi everybody and welcome to episode 4 of the Red Sofa Conversations. I created this series because I think that conversation is so important, because for me conversation is the gateway to connecting with people, and it is a true pathway to finding commonalities between the two of you or more of you, and I think that's a beautiful thing in life. It makes us feel like we're part of the human race rather than, different segments of the population. So on the red sofa with me today is one of my really close friends, who I have known for, coming up to
many
30 years. We went to school together. This is my friend Lynsey, and episode 4 is all about body positivity. Now, big topic, right? I never actually thought that
it's a huge topic.
I never thought that I would be doing an episode on this, but actually, the inspiration for this episode came from Jamila Jamil and her I Way movement. For those of you who may not have come across that as yet, do go on Instagram and have a look at it. The I Way movement is essentially that we are, as people, and as women especially, because I think women struggle with body positivity. Can't even say it. Body positivity. Body positive. Oh my god. Body positivity issues. A lot. I think that we're judged on our bodies a lot. That's not to say that men don't have struggles, because I know a lot of men who also vocalize this. But I think that a lot of the judgment and the sort of the criticism of women today is focused a lot on their bodies before what they're actually doing. And that's why I think it's a really important topic to talk about, because in talking about these things, I think that we get more understanding. So let's kick off.
Where do we
start? Do you want to tell me a little about what body positivity means to you, or why you think it's important to talk about these things?
Why? Oh, I think every woman, and I'm talking from a woman's point of view, has an experience of this. And I think, looking back, when was I first aware of some kind of negative, perhaps, connotation with my body? Probably when I was in my, probably in my 20s. I don't think I was, we can talk about, the pressure on teenagers and the more kind of youthful population later, but I don't think I was particularly aware of it until I was in my early 20s and I was experiencing other stresses, and then it became I don't know how close I came to an eating disorder, but I certainly experienced, deliberately restricting my calorie intake and being very aware of my body and judging myself very harshly on my body because of other stresses I was undergoing. I don't think I'd experienced that before, but I mean it's terrifying. You can see how it can escalate from something as relatively simple as just restricting, what you have for dinner, to then, thinking, oh my God, my stomach's not flat enough, or I want, a 6-pack, or, I want to look like so-and-so in the magazines. In fact, I consciously stopped buying magazines, I can't remember, probably in my early 30s, just because I found it so distressing and unhelpful.
Yeah.
Those images of women, and the fact that, you were constantly being, people trying to sell stuff to you. It's like, if I didn't know that dress existed, I wouldn't even want it. If I didn't know that woman looked like that, I wouldn't want to look like her. And I just thought, if I just, it was a deliberate form of
selecting what you have into your...
Yeah.
So I think you've touched upon a really interesting point, because it's comparison. So for you, you're saying that in your early 20s, that's the first time that you actually became aware of how you perceived your body. I think for me, and I think this is probably true of a lot of children, when you're really, really young, you're not really as aware of your body in terms of the comparison aspect, and you're making friends, and you're finding connections. And I've seen lots of like lovely cute videos on Facebook of little kids, and their different backgrounds and everything, and it's like, well, what are the differences and what are the similarities? And they don't see differences. They compare themselves in terms of, oh, well, he likes this and I like this, and that's why we like, and so initially you're not as aware.
Or they are aware, but they're not judging.
Judging.
It's just a fact.
It's just
it? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, because then what I found, and I perceived the difference between my body, and other friends' bodies when I suppose I really noticed it as in my early teens. And I remember we all had to go and get weighed when I was at boarding school. And we were all in a line and hearing everybody's weights, and then my weight was a little bit more than the other children. And so I think the other teenagers, and I think that that's when I started to sort of, when you can attach numbers to something, I think that I started having a more concrete idea of the difference. And I didn't love it, but it was just something that I kind of carried with me, I think. And I associated, because I wasn't the most sporty kid, at school. When we would have PE and we'd go for a run, like some people would actually go for a run, but they were in the minority, and other people would go to the shop.
Go for a run.
You go, okay, Lynsey would go for a run. And I, with my friends, would go to the shop and get Mr. Freezers and then go sit in the park. So
I didn't know that.
And so, I just never really identified with being that sporty. I didn't find something I liked. And so the first time that I actually came to doing like proper regular exercise, it was interesting. It wasn't actually to lose weight. It was about 8 years ago. It was a byproduct of being in such extreme grief after I lost my cousin, and coming home and eating tubs of Pringles and slabs of Cadbury's. And usually I would sort of eat that stuff as an accompaniment or, as dessert, and I'd have a proper meal. And I got to the point where I was grieving so much that, I would come home and like an automaton, I'd like open a top, and that would be all I would eat. So obviously a consequence of that is that I did gain weight. And I think it was about 8 months later that I saw a poster at the tube station for a lifestyle trainer, and I put the number in my phone. And then I think it was about another 4 weeks later, after seeing this poster every single day, that I came to the point of, I looked in the mirror and I felt so sad that I didn't know how I was going to, I suppose, come back to life. And nothing that I had done up to that point had changed. And so I thought, let me do something that I have never done before, and maybe then in 6 months I'll be able to look in the mirror and I will see something different, because I don't know how to heal the grief that I feel inside. And so I came to exercise through a very different route. And it was actually more important to me with who I picked, because I had personal training sessions before and they had wrecked me. So I was absolutely terrified. I'd have the session and tell people, look, I'm not that fit. And then the next day I wouldn't be able to walk for a week. So my criteria in picking my personal trainer, and Ozzy, if you're watching this, I do love you, was that he be kind and he not push me to the point where because I couldn't take anymore. I was already struggling. And on the first session when I met him, actually we met in a coffee shop and he bought me cake. Yeah.
It's exactly the kind of personal trainer I need.
I know. He brought me cake and he showed me all his qualifications, which didn't mean anything. And what meant the most to me actually was that I started to tell him why I had called him, and I started to cry. And he didn't do what most people do, which is, they get a little awkward and they look away and they don't really know what to say, or they kind of go, oh, it's going to be okay. He just let me cry, and he created a safe space for me, and so I trusted him. And he accommodated my fears, which were, I don't know whether I can do this, and I cannot be in so much pain that I can't then function, because of emotional pain and physical pain, and so I can't commit to signing up with you. Can I have a week of just trying it out? And he said, sure, which he didn't normally do. So he made that exception for me. And what I found the most incredible thing, which was I found a routine, and I liked him. And so for me, going to the gym and training with him wasn't just about training. The byproduct of that was that I got stronger and I got, fitter. But it was actually having a space where I could be on the cross trainer and cry, and be on the treadmill and cry, and and him not going, oh God, are you not over this yet? Or I think it's time to move on, and and so that was my kind of, I suppose, journey of weight loss over 3 years. But here's the interesting thing. With the comparison, I'd lost at about 20 kilos, 3 stone. And I kept waiting. This is the most weight I'd ever lost in my life before. And I kept waiting for my thighs, to have a thigh gap, and for my legs to miraculously look like my mother, who was an athlete when she was younger and was built like a gazelle. And what I didn't realize was that my body shape is completely different from my mother. And what I was able to see now in perspective is that I was waiting for my body shape to radically change. So while I looked in the mirror and I knew logically and intellectually that I had lost weight because I could see it on the scales, I knew it because I was buying clothes 2 sizes smaller. And yes, there was an ease about, getting dressed and whatever, but I did not appreciate it. And it's only when then I had a foot injury and I had to stop training and I gained the weight back and actually ended up gaining more weight back, that I started to feel the discomfort in my body because I wasn't able to move as easier. And I started realizing that, oh my God, and I don't know what the term is. You when we talked about this briefly before, you used the term body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether I don't know enough about that to know whether this is what it is. But what I know is that there was a huge disconnect.
I think it just shows you how skewed your thinking,
Yes.
one's thinking can be, because I'd always done, unlike Lara, I used to go for a run when we were told to go for a run because I was very well behaved and I liked, I liked exercising. I've always liked exercising. It's always been part of my life. And when I was a teenager and at school, exercising was just something I did because, it was part of PE and I liked doing athletics and netball and things. That was just what I did.
Yeah.
And I know, actually, I was saying I wasn't really aware of sort of body image and that kind of thing when I was younger. I guess I was, but not because of me, but because of others. Because I remember some of our friends, who I won't name, but being really concerned that they, went really red in the face, or they looked terrible in their PE kit, or, they didn't like the t-shirt or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, I'm just in my PE kit, this is just what we have to wear. I'm just going to go out and run around the field and go red in the face and get mud all over me. And, it wasn't, it's not great being sweaty and muddy and red in the face, but, that's what happens when you exercise, and that's just the way things are. That's all I knew. But I guess that was the first time, whereas I thought it was perfectly normal to do that. And I think I've carried that, luckily, I've sort of carried that through the rest of my life and how I've exercised. Now that's just been something, I don't mind if I'm sweating or, but I do know it's a big issue for other people. And similar to you, I've probably I've never had some kind of radical weight loss because I've always been active, I guess.
Yes.
But there have been moments where, I've looked at an image in a magazine, or I'm sort of, it's sort of instilled in my head about, supermodels and how, and how slim they are, and how, and how they do have these sort of amazingly straight and amazingly long legs. And even when I was doing a lot of exercise and it was perhaps getting a little bit out of control and I was, worried, I was sort of more concerned with my body image, I would think, oh, well, I need to get my thighs looking kind of that straight line and all that kind of leggy look. And then, it took me a really long time, possibly 20 years of having these thoughts and beating myself up to realise that my legs, like you, they were never going to look like Cindy Crawford or whoever it was at the time, because I'm just not built like that. So yes, I'm slim and I have an athletic build, but I have an athletic build, so I therefore have thigh muscles and I have calf muscles.
Yeah.
And I am sort of tall but curvy, and that doesn't, unless I was absolutely to starve myself, that I was never going to look like them, and if I did starve myself, I'd be really unhealthy. So it came to me, sadly, very late on, relatively in my life, when I was, possibly sort of, mid-30s or something, that my body was there to be strong and to help me do all the things that I needed it to do as a human being.
Yes.
And that it was an integral part of who I was, rather than being, rather than conveying some other message. I needed it to be strong and healthy.
Yeah.
And if that meant I was half a stone overweight, but I was still, I was still exercising or whatever it is, that's fine. It was there for a purpose. It wasn't just there to, look like a supermodel. And I think, but it took years of deprogramming myself.
That's a great word.
And that's terrifying. And I look back on that and you realise even now, how much how pervasive these images are, and how much damage they can do you, even as a sort of more aware 44-year-old. It's still incredibly powerful.
And I think that's why, I feel that now that I'm, speaking up and using my voice, I want to talk about the things that I think are important, because I think that it's important for us, having grown up without the world of social media and Instagram and perfection, perceived perfection. I think there's a huge amount of pressure. We were talking about this like last week. There's a huge amount of pressure on young kids coming up, growing up, and we had magazines, and magazines, now we know that they airbrush. I don't think I was ever aware of the term of airbrushing until was it 10 years ago or something? Kate Winslet made a big statement when a magazine had airbrushed her to the point where it didn't even look like her, and she lobbied hard for the magazine to release the cover, or she got the original image and she juxtaposed them so that people could see the extent. And I thought that was hugely brave at the time. And so I think that we have a responsibility now that we have we're maybe a little bit farther on the journey than somebody that isn't even aware that what's in front of them isn't reality. And in my 40s, I'm not the most tech savvy. I didn't even realize that there were these apps where when people post pictures on Instagram, you can put your picture through an app where you can take off the dark circles and you can smooth things, isn't it? And you can smooth things out. I wouldn't know how to do that. No, well, when I even try. Yeah, so I make it a point actually that when I post on Instagram, I think 90% of my photos I actually like the normal. I might swipe on the filters and then I see the difference. I'm like, nah, the normal's better, and so I post unfiltered pictures. But this isn't even filters. This is a specific app which allows you to adjust everything. And somebody that I knew at the last company that I worked, there was a picture of both of us, and I wanted her to send it to me. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to touch it up first." And she touched up the stuff for her, and she touched up me. And when she sent it to me, it didn't look like me, and I was in shock. And I was like looking at this picture, and I was like, "God, this doesn't look like me." And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say is that we're all on a journey towards, I think, acceptance. If we can see it like that, I think this whole thing is, our life is a journey towards loving and accepting ourselves for who we are and who we want to be, and for our character much more than our aesthetic. I'm not knocking wanting to look good. I think wanting to look good is great, but it's got to be your definition of what makes you feel happy and what, And
it's got to be driven by, your sense of self-esteem and self-kindness. You're doing it because of you, not because, and it's easy to say, isn't it, but not because you're comparing yourself to another woman. Actually, part of that, it's not just the pressure from the magazine industry, it's not even sort of the pressure from, looking good for a man or someone else, or a partner,
whoever your partner is,
But some of this comes from the pressure of trying to look good for other women too, because you're comparing yourself to other women, so you're worried about how other women are going to judge you. So we're actually our own worst enemies.
We can be,
in so many ways.
Yes, because I think that you repeat what you know, and I think that why, again, it's so important to talk about this is if we understand, because in episode 2 of this, we did a show on the power of language and self-talk, and I said in that show that I only even learned about mind talk and self-talk and monkey mind 6 years ago. I mean, before that, I had no idea that this little voice that was controlling so many things about how I felt about myself even existed. Yeah. And so I think if we shed a light on, okay, if you look and you don't feel good, why don't you feel good? Oh, it's because you have judged yourself, sometimes without even vocalizing the words. It's internal. And so we need to start, now that we know that little voice is there, it's about trying to reframe and give the little voice other helpful things to say. And so I want the next generation, because it's getting earlier and earlier. You know, I read stats, and I'm not going to quote them, but I read, really scary stats about kids that are very, very young, that have a very regimented idea about what they want their body to be, which means that rather than seeing themselves as, oh, I can dance and I'm brave and I'm a kind person and I'm
around
curious,
the field and get sweaty and muddy, and
they judge themselves, and I think that judgment is so hard. Self-judgment, judgment from other people, and so in doing this, I hope that we're a part of changing the conversation and shedding light towards acceptance.
I'm thinking, just going back to when we were teenagers, there was Just 17 magazine, which when I think about the sort of photography was really basic. So the teenage models that were there looked like your best friend.
Yes.
They were attractive, but they weren't like
they weren't
were they?
Yeah, they looked like
there was a girl from our school in the lower sixth form who was one of their models, and I remember thinking, she looks like she goes
exactly
to school.
So maybe the whole maybe with technology has allowed airbrushing and whatever to take place. I mean, I don't know when all of that started.
Yeah, but we had sort of Just 17 smash hits, and then however many channels, 3 or 4 or 5, or however many it was, at the time. And even I didn't watch much television because I was too busy doing other stuff. So it just wasn't that sort of, you just didn't have those images, did you? You didn't have those unrealistic images.
But even when I'm thinking of the programs that were there when we were growing up, Beverly Hills 90210, I was watching a lot of clips lately because from Luke Perry dying, and it was like a part of me, and my childhood, and I was looking at it from a different viewpoint, because actually even then they looked more real, and I think there was probably less pressure than I think there was pressure, because obviously there's pressure when you're on camera, but I think there was probably less pressure than there are on people right now. And another show, this is reminding me, Louise Redknapp did a show about the whole size 0 thing.
Okay.
Did you ever see that? Okay, so she actually, again, maybe this is 10 years ago, maybe around the same time as the Kate Winslet airbrushing, and she did a couple of episodes about where she tried to get to be size 0.
Right.
So she embarked on this. She embarked on it with the help of a trainer. She was being monitored, she was being monitored medically, etc. But she was putting her body through a lot, and I can't remember as to the period that she did it, but she went through that, and she describes how she felt getting down to that shape. She was irritable. She was exhausted. She was exhausted. She was irritable. It affected her morale, and she did this very bravely, I think, to cast a light as to a movement that had become, seen as, oh my God, size 0. That is the pinnacle. Yeah, the pinnacle of your journey. As a woman, if you get to size 0, you have it. And she did it to show, it's actually not all it's cracked up to be. And I think that these Kate Winslet, Louise, these are people. Jamila Jamil now, even Ashley Graham. A few years ago, Ashley Graham was featured in the DNCE video Toothbrush, and the one thing that was all over was, oh my God, they've used a plus size model to be in this, and I'd never heard of Ashley Graham, and I was curious. I clicked she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful, and she's curvy, and she's lovely, and when she talks you can't stop looking at her because she has ideas, and I love the way that she is so honest. And she also is part of this movement to I guess bring people along to celebrate who you are and to see you as more than just the weight on the scale. I mean, I weigh myself in the morning occasionally. That's when I will, because obviously, you know, it's better to do it. It's a more consistent. It's a consistent position. But I do it sometimes just to check. Now I will consciously, if I'm actually not feeling great about myself, I consciously don't do it because I don't want to add something. Like you were saying, I'm taking away, you know, magazines and everything. I don't want to add something that I know is going to make me feel worse. And I think that lots of people get into the habit, they weigh themselves and their whole day is based upon the weight, the numbers that are on that scale. And God, we're women. We have hormones. We have water weight.
I mean, your weight fluctuates so much, doesn't it? Sort of during the month, like even during the day, you know, you could have just eaten a massive meal, and then obviously you're going to weigh more.
Yes. And so if we're attaching ourselves to numbers on a scale, it's a very restrictive way to see it.
I remember I became obsessed during one of these sort of moments of great stress where I was, you know, exercising a lot deliberately, and I was restricting my intake deliberately, and I became obsessed with the scales. Yeah. You know, and I suppose
it's a way of controlling something that you can control.
But it was, you know, and I was, you know, making myself do, you know, 60 sit-ups a day, and then kind of looking at my stomach and going, oh no, but I'm still not happy, and I was running around the block, and there was this complete, you know, I must have been so thin, you know, I must have been 9 stone or something, and, you know, I'm 5'11". That was really probably not a good weight. That might have been, I don't even know what size 0 is, but, you know, maybe I was heading that way. And I remember when I, you know, a year or so later, I deliberately got rid of those scales because I don't want to judge myself like that because of all the fluctuations, because I became obsessed with it. And actually, you know, if I'm trying on my skinny jeans and they feel a little bit tight, I'm going, okay, well, you know, maybe I need to not drink so many pints of beer, or, you know, not eat.
And that's if you want to get to a place where you're, you know.
And that's because I felt, like you say, you know, I felt sort of, if I started feeling a bit uncomfortable, and I didn't want to go and buy a whole new wardrobe, and I just thought, oh, actually, I'm not kind of a comfortable weight. But I think that's a better way to judge than to, you know, these obsessions with, oh, I'm 1 pound, you know, heavier or lighter or whatever. It was like an evil obsession. It was very scary when I look back on it.
It's so hard. I mean, the irony with my journey after gaining weight back, I realized a couple of things, and one of them was that I was looking in the mirror and I felt, I'm going to use quite a strong word, but I felt sort of contempt for my body. And
I think a lot of people can. I can identify with that. I'm sure lots of people can.
And I felt that because I knew that I had lost weight before, and I had been stronger and fitter and healthier and everything. And then because of my foot injury, and I couldn't, you know, I was limping for, you know, a good 2.5 years, and I couldn't do any of that. And yes, I probably could have done something else, but I was kind of wedded to, well, I couldn't do this, and so I would look in the mirror and I would go, I know you were able to do that, and look what's happened. And it didn't work for me at that point.
Such a harsh voice, isn't it?
Such a harsh voice. And it didn't work for me to be looking in the mirror and saying, I love and accept you as you are, because I didn't. And so I thought, okay, that's not working for me. What is one thing that is going to work for me? And I realized, I don't know how I realized this, but I realized that having gained weight, I had not been putting cream on my body the way I used to. And so what I had done before was that I would put cream on my arms and legs, and I would put cream on my neck and my shoulders and my front and stomach and bum, and basically cream over my whole body. But when I had gained weight, I realized that I was just perfunctorily sort of putting it on my arms and legs. And I thought, oh, it's almost like I'm punishing myself. I don't deserve this because now I'm not what I used to be. And so I set out deliberately to, when I showered every day, I would put body wash on my body as if I was doing it to somebody I loved, like consciously. And then after, I would put cream on the whole of my body as before. And it's become a little ritual. Now, the great thing about this kind of ritual is that you can do it every day. If you mess up, you forget, or you're distracted as when you're showering, we're sometimes thinking of the next step of what we have to do that day or whatever. The next day, you can start again the next day.
That's a great idea.
And through doing that tiny little thing that I could just incorporate in my day that I was doing anyway, because I was showering and putting cream on my body every day, I didn't have to think consciously.
You're just doing it mindfully.
Yeah, I was doing it mindfully. And that has given me a level of love and acceptance for my body as it is now, which ironically, it's less than the maximum it's ever been, but ironically it's pretty much a little bit more than when I started with my trainer 8 years ago or something.
And I think that's a much healthier approach to your body than, I'm not a particularly high maintenance woman in terms of sort of beauty. I was talking to a woman in my cycling club yesterday who said for years and years and years she put off having a massage because if she knew she liked it, then she'd want to have lots of them, and then it was going to cost her more money. That's the kind of person I am. I was like, I've never really sort of dabbled, I only got I got a pedicure about 5 years ago for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is nice, isn't it? Because I've always hated my feet. So and this was sort of a way of me accepting my feet, going, oh, they're not so bad, they can look, they look reasonable. But I think again, it sort of comes down to how people are judging you. So if it's if you go for a massage because you think, oh, it'd be really lovely for me to have a massage and to treat myself, great. But some of the I'm not particularly interested in makeup or any kind of maintenance, and I think some of the treatments about looking a certain way because you're supposed to look a certain way because your peers look a certain way, that's possibly not coming from that sense of sort of mindful, oh, I'm doing this for me. That's coming from other people judging you. But what you're describing is something that you can really do for yourself, and that it's very meaningful, and that it's coming from that actually I believe in this. I want to sort of touch my body because I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
As opposed to changing yourself because you think you ought to look a certain way. Yeah. So it's a much sort of healthier approach.
I think that this is what I stumbled upon, and I literally stumbled upon it, and it worked for me. It worked to reframe, and I made a decision that, okay, next time around, if I embark on any kind of journey of change, I'm going to appreciate each step. And that's probably part of how I have changed as a person, because I'm much more aware of, I've gone through lots of changes, I've tried new things, I'm much more adventurous and willing to push myself outside of my comfort zone. I'm also very mindful of when I'm going through these changes, I'm not going to get from A to Z. And it's not about actually, for me, getting to A to Z. It's about me knowing that I'm being courageous and I'm being brave. And part of us having this conversation on camera and revealing quite personal things that I would normally, only talk about, to my friends, vulnerability. I think that's part of being brave. And I think that if we start seeing ourselves as a whole that is made up of all our imperfections, and we are either at a point that we love exactly how we look, or we think I might want to change something. But the one critical thing in embarking on change that I've certainly experienced is that you can't embark on any kind of change from a place of beating yourself with a stick and using a critical voice, and you must, and I must, and I should, and whatever.
Or the change might happen, but as you said, you still won't be happy. Yes. Because it's coming from it's being driven by the wrong source, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it's using the kinder voice, and it's attaching less importance to numbers or a particular aesthetic than the fact that you want to be stronger and you want to be able to run. I always admire you when you go, oh, I did a 5K, I did a 10K. When I was training with my trainer, that was one of my goals, was to do a 5K. And the idea of running, I think it would probably take me 40 minutes, not 20, to do a 5K. And I never got, I didn't do that because then, circumstances happened. But, it scared me a lot, the idea of doing it. Now, I could do a 5K now and walk, and that might be something that I choose to do because I want to do it. But I've lost my train of thought completely. I can't even remember where I was going with it.
I've given up running anyway, so we don't have to talk about 5Ks anymore.
But I think it was kindness. It's like, it's where you start setting goals and embracing a new thing, whether you're trying out running or yoga or whatever it might be, from a place of kindness and curiosity rather than, okay, I want to do this. Because one important thing that my trainer told me, I remember this, is that he was saying that when we lose weight, yes, we can do particular exercises that work on certain things, and it's important to do cardio and to tone at the same time, do strength training. It's incredibly important. But he said that we can't necessarily control exactly where the weight is going to drop off.
We were talking about this the other day,
yes,
weren't we?
And he said that, your stomach is actually, it's quite hard. And yes, you can do sit-ups or whatever, but you can't control and isolate. And I remember when he first told me this, I was like, what? No, but like the whole point of this is that I had a particular aesthetic in mind, and then you realise, oh wow, all the best laid plans, like
this is what I was saying about the kind of thigh thing. Is like you could have an incredibly
when I stopped you in the street. So to put it in context, when I asked Lynsey to do this episode with me, we were walking along the street, and I was telling her about when I had sort of only wanted to have a thigh gap, and I turned to her and I was like, "Do you have a thigh gap? And what did you do, Lynsey?"
I just stopped. We were in the middle of a busy street, like right near King's Cross, for me, and I just stopped in the middle of the pavement, and I put my legs together. I was like, yeah, I think I do. Oh look, I didn't know. It's just not something
this
that
thing
never
I know
had occurred to me. But
and then when I didn't even dare telling somebody that's what I wanted, because then the first time I did, my friend went, "Lara, do you realise that only a very small proportion of the population actually have a thigh gap?
Yeah.
There are loads of people who are super slim and fit and healthy and whatever, and they don't. So you have focused on this tiny little thing."
But I think, so whilst I wasn't aware of the whole kind of thigh gap issue, I think when I was like looking at the supermodels with their super straight thighs, like mine, I have massive muscle there where I go cycling, and that muscle has always been there, and actually it's got bigger since I've been cycling.
And the cycling has enabled you to have freedom and
I
joy.
can cycle up mountains and do all kinds of exciting things.
I can't cycle up mountains.
So I do have a very small thigh gap, possibly, but not like, the thigh gap that you might be talking about with the sort of the straight,
I just wanted one. I mean, I don't think I even thought about size.
But I just think, I might look at mine and go, well, my thigh gap isn't the right size thigh gap. It's just,
I think that's also a good point, because if we're setting out from a place of change, beating ourselves with a stick, I think that whatever the change happens, the goalposts move a little more.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anybody ever gets to a point where they're like, this is good enough, I'm good. It's constant. And so therefore...
Because that shift comes from here.
Yes.
It doesn't come from the changes you're making.
So it's about trying to rewire...
Which is really hard when you've had years of faulty thinking.
It's very hard, and that's why I think that if we can talk about these things, and for the younger generations to hear, they will hear that actually it's about much more than an aesthetic.
I think, when you were talking just before about the sort of change process, it is very much, it ought to be about the journey, not the destination. It's a cliche, but it's true. So even...
It's a cliche I've said in many speeches.
But even sort of in the past, 6 months, so I hadn't been doing much cycling just before Christmas, and I hadn't done much sort of immediately after Christmas, and I wasn't feeling that great. And I thought, the weather was a bit rubbish, and I thought, okay, if I go out on my bike, even if I go out for 20 minutes, that's better than not going on my bike, and I know it will make me feel better. Whatever happens, even if I get wet and cold, I'll come back, there'll be endorphins in my brain, and I will kind of go, oh, I've done, it was 20 minutes and out on the bike, and I'll feel better. And it was that process of every time I went out, It wasn't about, oh, I'm going to cycle at a certain speed, or I'm going to cycle, 50 miles today. I was like, I'm going to do as much as I feel like I can do, because I know it's going to make me feel better. And I think, and I know how much, exercise, how important exercise is to my, mental and my physical kind of well-being. And it was about that journey. So every time I did anything, every time I just got up and did something, it was an achievement. It was success. It wasn't about, oh, I need to, be able to cycle 100 miles in 2 months. It wasn't about that. And I think but that's taken me, sadly, years of not thinking in that way to kind of get to that point where I can go, actually, that's success. That's success.
I know.
It's not about, looking like this or being like that. It's about,
I mean, this is the irony. I think that we can get used to doing a certain thing. And I was with my trainer for 3 years. So for 3 years, 3 times.
Longer
yeah.
than my relationship.
God, it's my longest relationship. No. Bon Jovi has been my longest love affair. That's 33 years. Yeah. But it was 3 years, 3 times a week. And I got used to it. The minute that stopped because of injury, I have not yet been able to find a regular thing that I really enjoy doing. And so it's the activation energy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Sean Aker talks about this in his book, The Happiness Advantage. And he gives this description about once we get there, once we get to the gym, or we get to cycling, or we get in the middle of a yoga class, we're good, right? But it's the energy that it takes to get to the point of actually doing it. And he gave an example. He tested this out himself, where he would go to bed in his gym clothes, so that and then have his trainers right by his bed. So literally, all he had to do was the alarm went off. He was already dressed, and he would then put his feet in his trainers and he would be ready to go. Now, I've never done that, because the idea of sleeping in a sports bra is like particularly uncomfortable. But there's something to be said for it, because, you guys can't see this, but I have a reclining exercise bike in my lounge. And this bike is perfectly positioned in front of the television, because the idea was that I could sit on the bike and watch TV and be multitasking and be cycling at the same time. Not for an hour or whatever, but even doing 5 minutes. Let me tell you, it is probably 4 steps from the sofa to the bike, and even to sit and do 5 minutes, most days, I don't do it. It actually takes a huge amount of energy sometimes, depending on what state I'm in. And it's not because I'm busy. I'm sitting there and I just don't do it. And so I think that for every time that we do something, that's a little win. It's a win, and then you build momentum, and you do, okay, I'll do 5. You make it so manageable. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to do 5 minutes. And then the next day I'll do 6 minutes.
But I think rather than so when I was talking about cycling, I knew that it would make me feel better. Yeah. So rather than it being a sort of target thing, what you need to do is understand what incentivizes you and why you want to do it. Yes. So there was a whole article I was reading in The Guardian the other day, and I nearly sent it to you, but about why you might. It's about sort of about habits, but it was particularly about exercising. But why, what would make you stick to a habit, to a kind of healthy habit, and what would make you fall off the wagon? And it talks about a whole range of things, and that's what when people stop smoking and things, if they just go, I need to stop smoking because my partner's nagging me to stop smoking, that's not an incentive for you to stop. Yeah. That's because someome's nagging you and someone else wants you to do it. If you can't understand why you want to give up. If you go, oh well, if I stop smoking, then my partner will be happier, and that will be great for me, because then we'll have a happier relationship, and then we won't have these arguments and things. Mm-hmm. If you can understand that sort of level of motivation, then that's the thing that will carry you through and keep you sticking with your resolution. But if it's about, oh, I need to lose a stone because I feel terrible about myself, and therefore I'm just going to stop eating, and those things don't work. They don't work long term.
They don't work long term.
And it's about finding that, it's about understanding your own motivation, and that's an individual thing.
And it takes time.
It takes a long time.
I mean, I know a lot of things intellectually, and I have done
various
courses. I've done various courses, goal setting. I understand the importance of why, and the real critical importance of understanding, as you said, the motivation behind doing something. And for me, it's still a challenge. It really is. And like, I was accountable when I had a personal trainer, so if it was raining and I came home, I knew he was waiting for me, and also because I paid. But if that was me, and if it was me, it's like, oh, I was supposed to be there at 8. Well, it's 8:01. Oh, well, now let's aim for 9. Oh, I've missed 9 o'clock. Okay, well, now it's 10. It's too late. It's like, it's something that I find hard to start certain habits, certain things. Other things I take to like a duck to water, but particularly with finding, and I think it's probably that I don't think that I've ever found something that I get lots of joy. Like, I really envy guys who they play five-a-side football.
But that was going to be sort of preempting my next point, is that I have always enjoyed doing kind of sport and fitness things with other people. So now I have got to the point where I can go out cycling on my own. And sometimes I like that. But it's actually the camaraderie. And see, that's my incentive, is that we go out, we have a nice chat, I go out with my friends, we go and have coffee and cake and have a laugh. Yeah. And we've done some exercise. So it's that.
So maybe I need to find that.
I've always done exercise classes. I found running boring because I ended up, doing it on my own. It was vaguely bearable when I was with a running club, but actually it was just running that,
I can't run outside. It hurts my knees.
Right. No, I mean, it kind of knackered my knees as well. But, I did these boot camps in the park, and that was about, and I've got loads of friends now. That's how I met loads of friends when I first moved to my flat. I mean, so it's about a sort of, it's that. It's understanding. That's what keeps you going.
So in terms of group classes, I've done step back in the day. I've done Zumba.
Step's hard, isn't it? It's lots of coordination.
I didn't mind it.
I was worried I was going to sprain my ankle when I fell off.
Yeah. Step, Zumba.
Oh, I love Zumba.
Yoga. I like dancing. I think I love dancing and I love music. So I think that's probably the next thing. I should find some kind of movement class which incorporates dance, because that's something that I do for fun. Yeah. I dance around my living room. I put a song on and it's my happy place, and I'm like, I have space and I can just dance.
I gave up running and I took up Zumba because I was like, if I want to find some form of exercise, it's got to be fun and I've got to want to do it. Yeah. And I was like, I can dance for hours, and I can be really knackered and just dance for hours and hours.
Music comes on and it's amazing.
Yeah. And suddenly you're like, no matter how sort of knackered you are, you're like, oh, this is my favourite song, and you find the energy. I was like, if I can find a way of kind of keeping fit that does that, and Zumba was absolutely it.
But look at that also. It just occurred to me that when we're dancing, we're not judging ourselves, and we're not judging other people.
And you're expressing yourself.
You're just enjoying and being in the moment.
It's incredibly liberating.
And that's so lovely, because like that's the way that I think, that's the journey towards like being that way all the time. I mean, so funny story, like this whole thing of being on camera has been a bit of a journey for me. And it started 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So I was a member of Speakers Club, and I was doing, I think, my second 6-minute speech back in 2014. And it was the first time that they were going to film and put it on YouTube. But I hadn't been told that. And my speech was called The Thing About Balance, and it is on YouTube if you guys want to check it out. But as I got there and was getting set up, they said, oh, go get mic'd up. And I was kind of like, mic'd up for what? Because that had never happened before. And they said, oh, we're going to film, we're going to put it on YouTube. These are my thoughts in sequence. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I'd feel that way.
The thing about balance, I'm like rapidly like thinking about what I was going to talk about, and I realised, oh, I've talked about gaining weight and not feeling confident and dating, and how that makes dating out of the question. I'm like, oh God, no. And then the third thing was, oh no, I've gained a little, and I hadn't gained as much weight as I ended up gaining, but I'd gained a little bit of weight, and I was like, oh no, my ex-boyfriend is going to watch this video if he choose to Google me, and he's going to see that I've gained weight, and he's going to feel like he's won. this was the sequence of my thoughts. Now, because I had been speaking, you know, I had joined for I think 6 months prior. No, a year prior, and I had started learning the tools, because a lot of the tools I learned from my Speakers Club were not just speaking tools, they were really metaphors for life, about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, about seeing yourself. And also I learned this from Matthew Hussey's Get the Guy Weekend, you know, from an exercise where they asked us to write down the whole list of qualities of what we wanted in a partner. And then they asked us, well, out of all these qualities that you want in a partner, how many are you? Do you embody?
Yeah.
Because, you know, so you know, I'd written curious and adventurous, and I was curious, but was I adventurous? Not as much as I am now. You know, since 2013, I'm hugely adventurous now, and so because I had already been on that journey, those first 3 thoughts. Yes, they happened in you know, quick succession.
It's the default.
Because it's the default, and because, you know, with the deprogramming, I'm on a journey as well. But it was immediately followed up with, well, you know what? I have something to say, and I think that what I'm saying could possibly help other people, and I'm being brave by getting up, and I'm being even more brave by allowing myself to be filmed when I didn't know I was going to be, and letting that not throw me off, you know, my game. And actually, bravery and courage are values that I really admire, and that's what I choose to focus on. So yes, you have the fleeting thought, which is your default, but when you then do enough things, or you learn enough, and you try enough to sort of be able to follow it up with other more helpful thoughts, I mean, that's really the goal.
But the mindful thing is that you're then aware of the fact that you've clicked into the default kind of reaction, and then you're able to think around it, or think outside it, and understand what's going on, and what, you know, why that might be happening, and how you can, you know, how you can counteract that, I guess.
So we've hit 50 minutes now. So
crikey. God. So it's exhausting, this talking, isn't it?
So I think we're going to bring this episode to an end, but I just want to encourage you guys, for everybody that's watching, we'd love to hear your comments. Whether anything that we've said has resonated with you, whether you have anything to share, to add. And if you haven't seen the iWay page on Instagram, I'm assuming they have one on Facebook, I'd really encourage you to check it out, because Jamila Jamil has also done a couple of interviews with Sam Smith and with Lizzo, really honest, exposing, vulnerable interviews. And one of the things that she also encourages people to do is to send her pictures of yourselves where you have then written, or, you know, with technology, we put the labels of all the things that you are that are more than just your weight. So I am brave, I am a singer, I am I'm a cyclist, you know, I'm a speaker, and I can't wait to do that. You know, I'm gonna do that, and so I encourage you guys to do it as well, because this is a movement, and if we can all join together and support each other, I think that's where the real change will come, and the change for each other, and the change for ourselves individually. So thank you guys, and do watch the next one and let us know what you think. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.